You know what's my favourite holiday? Australia Day. Gas up the barbecue, bring out the beers, take yourself down to the beach. Celebrate being Australian this July 30th. I mean July 28th, 27th, 26th? Jingawalla, I'm Phoebe McIlwraith, and it's that time of year.
Now, talking about our nation, Australia Day, just around the corner. We've got the usual whingers out there pushing the Change the Date campaign.
January 26th has become a hot button topic for non-Indigenous people in Australia, fueling endless settler culture wars and nationalist myth-making. This year, a conservative think tank claimed that opposition to Australia Day is a relentless campaign by inner-city elites, the political class, big business, and civil society to cancel our national day. But fun fact, the whole Jan 26 invasion, colonisation, genocide, and then celebrating said invasion has always been a problem for First Nations people. But what about tradition, some might say? It's just simply always been that way. And to that I would say, are you sure about that? I mean, it only became a national public holiday in 1994, but let's yarn about the not so long history of Australia Day and January 26. If you ever bothered listening in school, you'd know that Jan 26, 1788 is the day the First Fleet, captained by Arthur Phillip, invaded Warran Sydney Cove and violated First Nations sovereignty, raising the Union Jack to claim the continent for King George III. What might have been left out of your curriculum though was that the landing was met with resistance by Gadigal people and surrounding clan groups, and this was replicated by First Nations all over the country. In fact, the first 140 years of colonisation is referred to as the Frontier Wars by Australian historians, academics, and First Nations community, showing the level of consistent First Nations opposition to the settler colonial project. Before 1888, New South Wales was the only colony in Australia to recognise January 26 as a date of celebration, calling it Anniversary Day, First Landing Day, Foundation Day, not Australia Day. Broadly across Australia, Jan 26 was seen as a date more relevant to the history of the New South Wales colony and ex-convicts, with the sister colonies of South Australia, Western Australia, and Van Diemen's Land, Tasmania, having different celebratory days. These other celebration dates include December 1st for Hobart Regatta Day in Tasmania, and in Western Australia, June 1st for Foundation Day and December 28th for Proclamation Day. The first ever official national day referred to as Australia Day was actually on July 30, 1915. This event was to stir up national pride and fundraise for World War I, and was repeated in subsequent years to raise money for the war effort on July 28 in 1916, July 27 in 1917, and July 26 in 1918. By 1935, most Australian states were recognising Jan 26 as Australia Day, except for New South Wales. It wasn't until 1946 that all states adopted both the date, the name, and declared their own state-based public holidays, which did not consistently fall on Jan 26 and was sometimes put to the nearest Monday. In 1960, the Australian of the Year award became a civic ritual used to further embed a national focus on January 26. Australia Day isn't some sacred and well-established tradition dating back centuries. It's also not a concept that has been historically unopposed. Beyond First Nations resistance since 1788, foundational Aboriginal protest to the creation of Australia Day still far predates the national public holiday. The 1938 Aboriginal Day of Mourning protest was a multiple years-long effort to have a proactive response from the Aboriginal community to the 150th anniversary celebrations of Captain Arthur Phillip's landing. Planned by civil rights organisation, the Aborigines Progressive Association, this came after multiple appeals to state and federal governments and even the keen to improve civil rights. The 100-person Aboriginal delegation with members from different nations across Victoria and New South Wales was chaperoned by an 1,000-person silent march of black and white people to Australia Hall in Sydney CBD. This protest is momentous for not only being the first national gathering of Indigenous people in Australia, which was difficult to achieve as it was illegal for Aboriginal people to move freely across the country, but has since been recognised as one of the first civil rights gatherings globally. The meeting in Australia Hall was only open to Aboriginal people, where after being forced to take the back entrance, mob convened to discuss issues affecting their communities, vote on a demand for equal citizenship rights, and to officially declare January 26 as a day of mourning. Many of these points were outlined in the manifesto Aborigines Claim Citizen Rights, written by Aborigines Progressive Association President Jack Patton and Secretary William Ferguson. Patton and Ferguson's manifesto asked Australians celebrating the 150th anniversary a question that is still relevant to conversations First Nations people are having decades later. The 26th of January 1938 is not a day of rejoicing for Australia's Aborigines. It is a day of mourning. This festival of 150 years so-called progress in Australia commemorates also 150 years of misery and degradation imposed upon the original native inhabitants by the white invaders of this country. We represent representing the Aborigines, now ask you, the reader of this appeal, to pause in the midst of your sesquicentenary rejoicings and ask yourself honestly whether your conscience is clear in regard to the treatment of the Australian blacks by the Australian whites during the period of 150 years history which you celebrate. Last year, we saw how easily the Prime Minister could call a national day of mourning for the death of Queen Elizabeth II. Yet First Nations people consistently declared and observed Day of Mourning has gone officially unrecognised for over 80 years. Despite being one of the oldest civil rights gatherings in the world, settlers never failed to attempt to undermine the Day of Mourning by inducing a but tradition rebuttal. When we understand our history though, we see that the concept of a national day in this country has consistently undergone reinvention to suit the agenda of the colonial project. There is no well-established tradition to hark back to, no important ritual to protect. For First Nations people, however, there is an enduring legacy of fighting to ensure the survival of culture, kin and country. There has been opposition to the creation of Australia since 1788, as well as opposition to the creation of Australia Day since 1938. Truthfully, it is the First Nations tradition of resistance and protest that has a much firmer foundation than any public holiday.